Hello and welcome to Pods Like Us. I'm Martin Quibell, known to my friends as Marv, and this time I'm speaking with Jerry from Totally Rad Christmas, and it's about time too. Hey Jerry, thanks for speaking today.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. How are
Thank you
you?
very- I'm okay. I'm going behind the curtains, pulling the curtain away here. This is my first recording for Pods Like Us since July.
Oh, wow. Wow. Were you just like that pre-recorded or
Yeah.
wow. See, that's amazing. I need to be like that. And I have got most of my recordings for the season done, but there's still five or six I'm missing. So that's cool. That's really cool.
Just you fit them in when you can, don't you? And if you can fit a lot of them in one go or in burst, then
hmm
and have them like backed up, it allows you the comfort to be able to do that. Actually, it's a bit early in the show, but I'd suggest that to people if you can find that time. I think that's a good suggestion for podcasters,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah, for sure. hmm
So why it's a stupid question, really, because I know the answer to this already. But for the fact that other people listening might not know this, why a Christmas podcast?
So mostly because my mom made Christmas very, very special. And
Yeah,
so I've always loved Christmas. I've always had a fascination with the whole mythos. And a lot of that is because of the Rankin Bass specials that are very popular here in the US that aren't as popular in other parts of the world. But there's like a whole mythology about Santa and Rudolph and Frosty. And then, of course, now as an adult, I can get more into the religious aspects of it. But as a kid, you don't care. You just care about the toys and like the presents. And there's a guy that's magic enough to deliver presents in one night. That's amazing. But it's just there's a whole change in people's demeanor in general. They're happier and the Christmas music makes people smile more and just feel warmly because it makes brings them back to when they were kids. And so there's a whole nostalgia kind of wrapped up in this season that I feel really brings warmth and joy and love. So for me, it has to be Christmas. And when I knew I was going to start a pod, there was just nothing else that I could really talk about. It had to be Christmas.
yep. Which is one of my favorite bits about your show is the fact that when you did start it, what better way for you to start than to actually have a show with your brothers in there with you?
Yes. Yes, very much so. I knew that had to be my first episode. I at that point had only recorded with a couple of people, maybe once or twice. And so I wanted to be as comfortable as possible and talk with people that I knew loved Christmas, not quite as much as I do, but almost as much. And so I had to have my brothers because we have that rapport that's natural. And I knew I wanted to talk about the Time Life Christmas, Treasury of Christmas, because that was something that was like a staple in our house. We grew up with it. We listened to it at least three or four times during the major events, like setting up the tree, trimming it. We'd use some of those songs, Christmas caroling, Christmas Eve, while we're after we get back from mass and Christmas Day while we're opening presents. It was a lot of occasions to listen to it. And so with my brothers, I knew that I could just focus on the conversation and not focus on trying to build rapport with these people because that really is the trick, right? As you're interviewing someone, you have to be open and you have to be funny. You also have to be smart and witty but and caring and compassionate, but you also have to have this we know each other, we've known each other forever kind of feel that I like to just say rapport, because if you don't, then it does feel forced and you're really like straining at gnats to get that emotion and that connection. So with my brothers, I knew it had to be the very first episode, and it was fun. We just had a blast talking about it. We could have gone on for another 5 hours, but I was trying to limit myself to an hour as close as possible. So we made it work.
It was instantly approachable or sort of like interesting because it made me think about, and I'm sure it did with other listeners as well. it made me think about conversations that I have with my own brothers as well. And there's a certain way that brothers are with each other when they're talking that is completely different to when you're having a conversation with anybody else. Really,
Hmm.
there's and it's just there within you, and I felt that very strongly there, and it reminded me of my own discussions with my own brothers as well. And I'd love to be able to do podcasts with them and get them on the show, but I'll give a secret here. I actually did have a chat with my one of my younger brother on
Oh,
Zoom,
nice. Hmm.
and then mentioned while we were having the chat, I said, "Oh, by the way, this is automatically recording on Zoom because I might use it for a show."
Nice. I,
So it was
you're right.
almost like
Yeah.
pulled in. But yeah, yeah, when you're talking with your brothers, it's something completely different. And you're right, there is that warmth
Right.
to it and that sort of natural way that you are with each other.
Yeah, and I think that's important. That's some of my favorite podcasts are folks that have been friends for years because they just have that special connection between each other. And yeah, sometimes they make jokes at each other's expense, or they'll talk about inside jokes that it makes me want to like learn and be inside that joke, be a
Yeah.
part of that little special group that knows what they're talking about. So yeah, I knew I had to be with my brothers that very first episode, and I've had one of them on. The other one's really, really busy, and now he's a professor at a college, and so now it's really difficult to get a hold of him. But before that, he was a producer of like certain plays and shows and things like that. And so I try to get him on when I can, but really it's just the younger one, Danny, that comes on now. I hope again to do like maybe for my 500th anniversary or something. Maybe I can get them both on and we'll talk something. But yeah, it's just scheduling is kind of hard.
You could do it all live in front of the college class.
That's 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 true. That'd be something. Hey kids, you guys want to hear about Christmas in the 80s?
Yeah, yeah, and get somebody there with a microphone to pass it around for them to join in.
That's right. Oh, that's true. Yeah, we could have a live question and answer section. That'd be fun.
But that discussion, I'm not going to harp on about this for much longer, really, about this
Oh, that's
specific
all right. Mhm,
episode. But it's
mhm.
just that it's sort of when you were mentioning, because you went out of the time life thing and you were talking about other things from family Christmases as well when you were kids, and that sort of also touched me as well because it reminded me of Christmases. I've said before on my show that one of my favorite memories was not exactly Christmas Day, but I think it was the next day. So it's Boxing Day to us in the UK, the
Boxing Day for y'all.
26th.
Right. Mhm.
Um, and then that was the day when when I was a child, everybody used to go to my grandparents where there was food put on, like a
Yeah.
buffet type thing for people to go to. And I used to think it was incredible as a kid because you've got all your cousins there, your aunts, your
Mhm.
uncles, and all this extended family there. And I thought, oh, that's marvelous. And only years later did I suddenly think to myself, how on earth did they fit everybody in a two up and two down?
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's one of the beauties of talking with family, right? Is that you start reminiscing, and that's really the whole point of my own show is I can get into some of the details about specials or albums or whatever, but really I just want people to feel that feeling that they felt when they were 6 years old, 8 years old, 10 years old, running to the Christmas tree and just being with their family, opening presents or singing songs, just whatever that magic feeling was of Christmas time. That's kind of what I strive to recreate. And so whenever I'm talking with my brothers, especially, I always think of one of the things that I loved about Christmases growing up was we'd go to my grandparents' house and it didn't matter how many cousins, because my mom was the youngest of six girls, and
Yeah,
each one of them had like between 3 to 5 kids. So there was just everybody there. And my grandparents, my grandma especially, was just they were just really poor. And so, my my aunt moved in with her, and they had actually started not making a lot of money, but enough to where they could provide more than they ever used to. And so they would just take down the whole porch, everything, all the patio furniture, all the junk that was there, and they would set up all these tables with tablecloths, and it was just like big rows,
yeah,
long, long rows
yeah.
on their porch outside, and we would just eat Christmas dinner and or lunch, whatever it was at the time. And it was just great seeing everybody, and all the kids would go play and all the adults would stay and talk. And it's as you grow up, you kind of lose track with some of your cousins and some of your extended family. And so whenever I think about Christmas, I think about the times when we would all just play together and have fun. And we were close. Even if you weren't close with some of your friends at school, you're probably close with some cousins. So yeah, it was good times. It's definitely good times.
I'm going to find a photograph and I'll private message you this photograph.
Yeah.
There's lots of photographs, but it's not Christmas, but that you said there with the porch.
Hmm.
So my grandma's house was in the middle of three houses that were together,
Oh wow.
essentially,
Hmm.
like a terrace of three houses. But
Okay.
she was really good friends with the people on both the other sides, and they had children and grandchildren as well. So there is a picture online of the house at one of the ends, had a really big garden at the side, and they got lots of tables together and put like tablecloths over them all, and
Hmm.
everybody's families turned up with the children for all of those three houses and the grandchildren. And there is a picture of that there, but that was in the summertime, I think, when that happened. It's too cold in
Either
the
way,
winter to do that.
I'm in Texas, so like a typical Christmas here is like 70 degrees, something like that. It's definitely a green Christmas. And it's not quite the typical what you think of when you think of Christmas time with the snow and all that. But yeah, it's just cool because nowadays everybody's so spread out. There's people in other states. It's hard now that grandma's passed away, it's hard for everybody to get together.
Yeah.
And so yeah, just thinking about stuff like that is it makes you feel all warm and cozy and the Christmas feels and everything inside. So it's great. And you just wish that we could have that again. And that's kind of the point of my show, really.
Yeah. It was nice to dip into your show and listen because it does have that warm, comfortable feeling to it that nostalgia brings to you.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, definitely.
Was was it the chat with Cara Zelaya about It's a Wonderful Life?
It
Is that
was. That's
is that the one where you mentioned something about to people in Texas, if it's 60 degrees, it's cold?
That's probably is, yeah. I might have said that a few times because it's true. So I'm in, and even more than Texas, I grew up in South Texas. So now I'm in North Texas, but in South Texas, I was like 15 minutes from the Mexican border. Down there, it's hot, it's humid, and a typical summer is somewhere between 100 and 112 degrees. And so when winter comes along and it starts going lower than like 70, all of a sudden as a kid you were like, oh, it's what is this? This is cold. I'm not used to this. I'm used to just sweating like crazy. And then there were a few Christmases where it got into the 30s, and that was super cool and magical because we had to wear our big heavy coats that we hardly ever wore. And it's cold at Christmas time. That's amazing. But yes, typically, especially in South Texas, if it's in the 60s or lower, especially the 50s, but it's like cold. Up here now that I live in North Texas, that feels great. I wish it was 60s all the time, but yeah, growing up, no, for sure. That's cold. Put on a jacket at that point.
Yep. And your conversation with Karu about It's a Wonderful Life was also interesting because she said something about when she first saw it, she didn't like the film, and it grew on her over the years. And we had
Right.
the same effect, or my other half Louise had the same effect, where the first time she saw it, she didn't particularly like the film the first time,
Mm.
and then the second time was the time that it hit. Then it was like, oh wow, that's a really good film. But it's interesting because it's one of those films as well where you were saying in the show where there's these strange people who say it's not a Christmas film, and you think it sort of is.
Right. Yeah, it that I just remember giggling a lot. We were laughing a lot. But yeah, it's bookended with Christmas. So it starts on Christmas Eve, and then we see this long like flashback sequence, and then we cut back to Christmas Eve again. So it really is a Christmas film. But all that long flashback is most of the movie. And
Yeah.
so it's easy to see, or it's easy to think why it's not. And so I can understand why someone would think it's not. I also understand why someone wouldn't like it immediately because it is kind of depressing. It's just
Yeah.
all these things happen to this guy and he can never quite accomplish his dream of going and exploring the world. But in the end, there's a good message that you don't have to go out and explore the world as long as you are living and giving and caring and loving. That is the greatest adventure of all. And so it really is nice to know that if you have family and friends that can mean more than all the treasure and riches in the world, and that can mean more than all the experiences because it's the little experiences. But yeah, it's I can totally see how someone would see that and say, "Oh man, I don't like this because this guy, first he loses his hearing and then he
I
can't
know.
go to college and just it's like hit after hit after hit." But for sure, it is a Christmas movie, the and famously, and it's the Christmas movie that people use in other movies to prove that it's Christmas time. So they're watching it at Home Alone, they watch it in on other TV shows. So when you need a Christmas film, and especially one that at the time wasn't copyrighted, you gotta use It's a Wonderful Life.
And then another episode that I really enjoyed listening to was the episode about Merry Christmas Everyone, but the song by Shaking Stevens.
Oh, yes.
And
Yeah.
I
That was
always
fun.
thought with I always thought with that song, it's an interesting one because and it was pointed out in the episode as well, somebody mentioned it, that it was recorded or due to come out the same year as basically Band Aid and
Mhm.
White and Last Christmas
Last
by
Christmas, right. Mhm.
Wham. So it was originally intended to come out then, but then they found out that those two songs were coming out, so they staggered it and made it a year later. But
That that's wild, right?
which is
I'm just
wild.
like,
And then he made a
ha
number one single because he waited a year.
it would have been at best number 2. There was no competing with when you have like your proceeds are going to charity, there's just no competing with that.
Yeah,
So he had this crazy awesome song, like this hit song, and they knew it was going to be a hit and they just held on to it for a whole year.
yeah.
What that's that's mind-boggling, but at the same time, it was the right decision because then it let it actually hit. Now, for some reason, that's one of those, like I was mentioning earlier, that's one of those that just didn't quite transition to the US the way Last Christmas and Did They Know It's Christmas did.
Yeah.
But at the same time, once you hear it, it's hard to get it out of your head. It's catchy, it's kind of danceable,
Yeah.
and it's really easy to sing and play, so much so that last year I was playing at a little gig, just playing guitar, just hired to do a little gig with a buddy of mine, just background noise. And after we kind of cycled through a bunch of our Christmas carols, we thought, let's do some Christmas songs. And so we did some typical Christmas songs. And then we kind of ran out. So I said, "Oh, I have this new one that I just learned," and pulled out, just started playing it, pulled out sheet music, and yeah, he was into it. Like he liked it immediately. So it's one of those that is so catchy and so listenable and memorable. And the fact that it has not transitioned is almost a travesty. Like it's terrible that it hasn't quite made it over here because it's just such a fun, upbeat, like Christmassy, feel good song.
So I'm going to suggest now that a British filmmaker, needs to do a Christmas related film and stack it with all these what we over here call classic British Christmas songs, and then put the film out to the world, and all these
I
British
agree.
artists will suddenly end up on the American and charts all over the world with these songs that didn't go anywhere in the 70s and 80s.
I think that's a fantastic idea because another one that's I think it was even voted like number one Christmas song over there was Fairy Tale of New York.
Mm,
And while that had some popularity in New England, here in Texas, nobody knows it. When you bring it up, nobody knows that song.
yeah.
And so it's strange, but at the same time, it's just it wasn't a hit. And I think
Mm,
that song could be a very popular song. I know people in New York obviously like it because it's called Fairy Tale in New York, but yeah, it's just one of those another thing. And so if they were to make a movie and do that, that would I think that'd be brilliant. I know when I talked about Merry Christmas, everyone, I had Adam from Merry Britsmas on with me, which
yeah.
is a British podcast, and we were both just fallen all over that song. So if you have that song and Fairy Tale of New York and December Will Be Magic Again and all these other like British songs, I think Mistletoe and Wine is another one that's
Yep.
not known over here. Nobody knows really Cliff Richard except for one or two songs. But that would be massive. I think that'd be just huge, and I'd watch the heck out of it for sure.
It's interesting you should say that because another show I am a co-host on, Top of Most of the Poppermost, where we're going through all the charts from the 60s and onwards. Both of my co-hosts on that who are from America, one from near you actually, Houston, and
Okay.
then so that's Ed Chen, and then Kitty's from Chicago. And both of them have said that because we're going through the English and the American charts, they're
Hmm.
being introduced to songs by Cliff Richard and by all these other artists in Britain that never did anything or didn't do very much in America, and
Right.
it's like eye opening for them.
Yeah, yeah. Good music is good music, right? No matter where it's played, no matter when it's played. But sometimes, unfortunately, because of where it's played, it just doesn't get heard in other places. And it is one of those things where I wish we could hear. So there's a song from the 80s that's a Christmas song called Yola Hjol by Snigla Bandid. It's an Icelandic Christmas song. I have
Okay.
no idea what they're singing about. I know it's about like a bike that he gets on Christmas Day. But I don't speak the language, so I don't know. I just listen to it. But the song is a good, catchy song. Now, because of course it's not in English, it kind of got discounted and it just wasn't heard over here. But once I listened to it, I thought, man, this is a shame because it's just a really feel good type song. And I wish we had more of that because I think I would like to listen to this band and I would like to explore about this band. So yeah, like Cliff Richard, what is it? Is it Devil Woman, right? Is that the song
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, that's like the only song that I knew by him, really. And then Adam from Merry Britsmas and Jack from Total Christmas we're talking about some of his Christmas songs, Mistletoe and Wine, and yeah, one of his albums, I think later on, and a few other things. And I thought, wow, I don't know this song, and it's so popular over there. How have I missed out? And so I explored, and I thought, wow, this is fantastic. And so if we had more of that, I think it'd be amazing. I'd love to hear more like French songs and Spanish songs and Russian songs and just all sorts of artists because yeah, it makes the world smaller, but also just like I said, good music is good music and you're going to appreciate it no matter what language it's in.
But in the UK, we've had more of a thing for Christmas festive songs in the charts, really, by
That's
bands
true.
than
Hmm.
America. And
That's also true. Yeah.
when I was
Hmm.
talking with who was I talking with from Sleigh Bells and a Mistletoe Christmas,
Ricky, maybe.
Ricky. When I was speaking with
Hmm.
Ricky, I was saying that perhaps it's because there's this history in the UK with music where because of the music hall and the vaudeville side of it, in
Hmm.
essence, I think there's more of a thing in British culture for that sort of almost old-fashioned sort of sound that you get in a lot of these Christmas songs, but
Hmm.
also for slightly not really weird songs, but songs that are more have a certain thing to them. So you get these songs that are don't know what the word is for it, but yeah. So I'm trying to think of songs like it. It'll make no difference to the Americans at all. But there's this strange song that I really hate, to be quite honest, by some artist who calls himself Crazy Frog, which is just terrible. But it's those sort of songs that are almost like a bit like oh that Britain has more of, and they seem to find themselves getting into the charts quite high. And so we're more open to those as a general public in the UK to buying them than the
Hmm.
Americans. So maybe that's wise because we're more geared towards that in our charts, whereas America is more, I don't know whether commercial is the word or not. I don't know.
I think it is definitely commercial. I think one of the other things is that the ever since was it Wizard and
Yep.
that battle for the Christmas number one, that's like a huge thing over there. Here, they just play the same old tracks. It's they'll stop at least back in the day, especially in the 80s, they would play, maybe you'd get like a Christmas song here and there, but radio stations just kept playing the same thing. And then it kind of like shuts down almost. It's like a weird thing where no one cares. They're just kind of trying to get through the new year. The charts kind of end and no one really pays much attention to it. It is kind of strange. And I don't know why that is, but it is strange that we don't have more like now we do, because now ever since 1987 and A Very Special Christmas, it seems more and more Christmas albums and Christmas songs have come out. Because at least here in America, especially in the 70s and 80s, Christmas albums were like things that country stars or like people on the last legs of their career did. And A Very Special Christmas kind of really changed that. It was also trying to raise money again for the Special Olympics. And so they used famous popular artists of the time, and they just re-recorded songs or created new songs and did different things. And so that kind of brought back the whole Christmas album concept that like Phil Spector had popularized in like the 60s and Bing
Yeah.
Crosby and all those. And that kind of brought it back. And ever since then it's kind of stayed. But there was a period from like the late 60s to the mid 80s where it had kind of really died, at least here. So I don't know, but it is a strange phenomenon that we don't kind of have a big number one or a big push. It's more just how long has something been on the charts? Okay, that's cool. That's what we'll care about. But I don't know.
So you've decided that you're going to make a podcast about Christmas.
Hmm.
What is the history of the podcast? You getting it started, and how were you introduced to podcasts?
So okay. So at first, the only podcast I ever listened to, this was back in 2016, and it was How Did This Get Made? And I was
Yes.
working as an insurance salesman. I sold life insurance, and one of my fellow agents was asking me if I'd heard this particular podcast, and I said no. So I started listening to it, and that was the only podcast I listened to for years. And then in 18, I thought, you know what? I wonder if there's Christmas podcasts. So I started Googling and I listened a little bit to the Christmas Stocking and Christmas Past I listened to. But the one that really caught my attention was Tis the Podcast.
Yeah.
And it caught my attention because it was very similar, at least as far as makeup goes. There's two guys and a girl, and just there are in How Did This Get Made? And so I thought, okay. But also they talked about a lot of the stuff that I liked. So they talked about Rankin Bass, and there was a lot of interesting theories on Rankin Bass and how they all had this huge nostalgia and love for it. But there's two that when they rewatched it, they just didn't think they held up. So I started just getting in on their conversation. Like they had a Reddit page and a Facebook group, and I just started, I don't know, making myself known. And then they had a thing where if you're a member of their Patreon and you subscribe to the highest level, they like invite you on and you do a show with them.
Mhm.
And so I thought, you know what? I love Rankin Bass. It's part of my childhood growing up. It's part of my Christmas. Like it doesn't feel like Christmas if I don't watch these specials. I said, I want to talk about the ultimate Rankin Bass special, Rudolph and Frosty's Christmas in July.
Yeah.
That's the Avengers or the Secret Wars or the Crisis on Infinite Earths of Christmas specials. So, because I'm also a huge book nerd, if you couldn't tell. But so I joined, I got on, I had a lot of fun talking about it. And afterwards, there was another Christmas podcast host, Todd Killian, that
Yeah.
messaged me afterwards and said, you know what? That was a lot of fun. You should come on, you should have your own show. So I thought about it and I thought, yeah, that'd be fun. What would it be about? And I thought maybe the 80s because I love the 80s. And I just really wanted an excuse to talk about like movies and toys and comics and just anything I could think of. But then I kind of wanted it to be Christmas as well, because as I mentioned earlier, that's just that time when you feel the most joyous and just happiness, all sorts of happiness. So I kind of mashed them up together, and I had the theme, I had the title for the show, I had the theme song written. I was driving home and I literally just pulled over into a library parking lot and recorded it on my phone. And then I fleshed it out. I went back and did it all later. And so I had that, and that's about it. And I let it sit for a few months until COVID hit, and I thought I got time. I need to
Yeah.
do something to keep sane. So that's kind of when I started, like just fully doing it. And I fleshed out my little segments that I do at the end, and yeah, just kind of came from there. But really, it was more just someone said, "Hey, you should have a show." And I thought, "Okay, I'll do it."
So how do you then choose what subjects? Basically, subjects is anything that's 80s. I'll just add with a little asterisk here. 80s
That's right.
and slightly beyond. Goes up to about 93.
It does, yes. So the reason I added a few transition years because the 80s didn't like just stop and
No.
then the 90s culture took over. It kind of bled over. And then same thing, the 70s culture kind of bled over, but 80s culture started being introduced as well. So I kind of give a little grace period from 77 to 93, but it also lets me cover Home Alone, which was in 1990, and The Muppets Christmas Carol, which was in 1992. So I thought I'll kind of expand that. Choosing subjects, I wanted to talk about everything.
Yeah.
So I don't care. So I have a whole episode on just decorations from a particular catalog. We talk about wish books, which I don't know if you guys have over there, but like Sears and J.C. Penney would have these big, thick books, usually about 600 to 900 pages, just of all the stuff that they're selling and what's popular. What are you going to get for Christmas? And they were huge. Like we would get them, we would circle what we wanted, and our parents kind of knew what to buy us. Like that, I wanted to talk about food. So I have a few episodes on just on like foods that were popular, especially during the holidays during the 80s. I talk about music. You mentioned Shakin'
Yeah.
Stevens, and there's a few others that are coming out. But of course, you can't talk. I really just wanted an excuse to talk about anything because I could have just stuck with movies and specials, but I also really wanted to talk about all the cool toys that I got, like Castle Grayskull, which is like my most favorite toy that I got for Christmas ever. And so I just started doing research. I just literally would go just scour the internet and write down everything I could. I have pages and pages and pages of things that I can cover. If I wanted, I could take this show for at least another 20 years.
Yeah.
I don't know if my wife will let me do that, but I could with all the things that I have to talk about. And I'm still surprised. I have a list that's about 14 pages long now of just 80s Christmas music. And I was surprised the other day when I covered a movie that there was a particular song that Bonnie Tyler did to for this in 1989. So I added it to the list and I went and found it. And it's one of my favorite 80s Christmas songs, but little things like that. So as far as choosing what I'm going to cover each year, I tend to kind of just throw out a bunch of ideas and see who's available and to talk what and if they would like to talk that. But I like to have a couple of mainstream topics here and there. So this year we're going to talk about things like the Smurfs, the Chipmunks, things that people know. But then we're also going to talk a little bit more obscure. So the let's see that movie I was just talking to you about, Dial Code Santa Claus, which is a French film from 1989. So things like that. And so I try to have a good mix of what people know and what people don't know, a mix between specials, TV episodes, movies, toys, and music as well. And then throw in like the miscellaneous things like comic books and just have one or two of those peppered throughout a season.
That's an interesting one, is because with that, like the television specials, like for instance, hiding behind your head, the He-Man. You've got the He-Man Christmas
Oh, yes.
special, for
Yep,
instance.
there he is.
Um,
That's right.
no, don't even go into the fact that why would Santa Claus be on a different planet? But there you go.
It's a strange one. I love it, but it's strange. It is odd. Yeah. So I try to just talk everything that I love about Christmas, and there's some things that I had no knowledge of. So like strawberry shortcake, I knew
Okay.
about it because I had friends that were girls that collected it, but I just have brothers. I don't have any sisters. So I had no hands-on experience with strawberry shortcake. So I kind of relied on my guests and I chose guests that I knew about strawberry shortcake in that case. There is a strawberry shortcake Christmas album, although it's really Christmas in just name only because it's not really about Christmas at all. But so little things like that. I try to get people that I know will enjoy and have maybe some knowledge about things that I don't know about. So that episode that I just dropped in September on that Dial Code Santa Claus movie, I got Jay and Jeff from Horror for the Holidays because that's really in their wheelhouse.
Yeah.
And so they had seen it before. They had went to a special screenings of it, and so we were able to kind of talk through some things, and it made it for a lot of fun because they filled in my gaps of knowledge. And so it's really fun when everybody knows about it because you can really geek out, but sometimes you can get too geeky. So if it's like someone that really can geek out about something and then maybe someone that is only a little bit knowledgeable, then it really kind of meshes well. That's what I've found.
So, how have you found it being able to arrange guests then for the show? Was it difficult to start with, and then it's got easier over time? I'm guessing.
Big time. Yes. So nowadays, I think there are a lot of there's a whole Christmas podcast network,
Yeah,
but there are a lot more Christmas podcasts, and for some of them, they're just getting started. So I like to get those people on the show right away so that we can get exposure for there. Not that I think I get a normal number of downloads. I really have nothing to compare it to. I don't talk download numbers, but it's Christmas, so September through like February, it's a massive uptick, like ridiculous download numbers. And so I try to get as much exposure to newer podcasts as you can. And so especially if it's they've only had like an episode or two, it's come on the show and let's talk and let's get more people listening to your show because you have a perspective on Christmas that I might not have ever thought about. So I tend to do that. But when I first started off, it was very much it was the guys from Tis the Podcast because I knew them,
yeah.
and it was a couple of other people here and there, and my brothers, like I mentioned. And then it was just all right. Here's a new podcast I'd never heard about. Come on the show. And season two, I was approached by another group of network of podcasts. They call themselves the Illumipati, like Illuminati, but with pod. Anyway, boom. But anyway, so they wanted me to join, and we just kind of promote each other. And so I kind of drew from season two a lot of my guests from that network, people that were just regular podcasts, not necessarily Christmas podcasts. And so we'd kind of talk a few things that way as well. And it was nice to get like fresh perspectives. But there's like several people that are my favorites that I love to have on because I know we're going to have a blast. I know we're going to just really joke around and make people laugh and make ourselves laugh. So it has gotten a lot easier. Yes.
I was going to go somewhere there. Have you listened to Elf Control,
That one, I don't think I have. I don't think I know that one.
which
Mm-mm.
is a Christmas-related audio drama comedy in
Nice.
essence? So it's North Pole Santa Claus, who's always drunk. He's drunk on the eggnog all the time.
Of course. Yeah.
He's got a serious addiction there. And all the elves trying to make things work better, including the chief elf. And yeah, that's quite funny, but it's not for kids.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. I'll check it out. I'll check it out for sure. Yeah. Elf Control. Nice.
Elf
Okay.
Control.
Yeah.
I chatted with the creator of that last year, and that was
Nice.
fun.
I know a bunch. There's a ton, and I think there's 44, 45 different members of the Christmas Podcast Network, but there's some that aren't even in the network officially. They're just doing their own thing, and we've invited them, and some have declined to join. Some have said they're going to and just never gotten around to it because I guess when we send the link invitation out, it only lasts a few, like couple of days, and then it expires. So different things, but there are a lot of Christmas podcasts out there, and so I try my best to talk with them first because I know they actually are going to love Christmas. But I'll invite anyone on really. So
Yeah. Rick is a great guest from Sleigh Bells and Mistletoe Christmas. She's
she
all,
is.
but if she can
Yeah.
fit it in, sometimes it feels like she's trying to move things around so she can talk about Christmas.
That's right. Exactly.
But then
But yeah, she's cool.
same goes for Wayne from Christmas Alphabet as well.
Oh yeah, Christmas alphabet. Yeah. It's a little bit harder to schedule because I only get one day off during the week during this season. This is our busy season.
Yeah.
So it is a little bit harder to schedule recordings for people in other countries. There's a few. Dwayne from Tinsel Tunes, it's a lot easier because it's the same recording time for me and it's just the afternoon for him. So as long as it's on like a Friday or Saturday night, it's his weekend. So it's perfect. But for example, like right now we're recording during the day, and luckily I had nothing going on today. So I was like, yeah, let's do it now. But sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to record over here. There's another guy from It's a 90s Christmas podcast,
Yeah.
Lasse, that he's in Germany. And so that one's a little more difficult as well. And so while I typically record at nighttime, it was going to be like 3 or 4 a.m. for him. So I had to kind of move some things around to make it work. But
I did that when I spoke with the people from they were at the time called Anime Shoshin. I don't think they're doing any shows anymore. But
mm,
yeah, when I spoke with them, I think we started at 2:30 in the morning. But then we couldn't stop talking, and I think it
right.
ended up being almost 6 o'clock in the morning at that point. And I said, guys, I'm gonna have to go to bed at some point. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, the time zones don't help sometimes.
No, no, but we try. We do our best.
So how do you record and edit the show?
So I just usually use Zoom. Most of my guests are all across the country, and like I've said, there's a couple across the world. So we do Zoom recordings. At least I've tried some of the others like Riverside and some of the other ones out there, but Zoom seems to be just the easiest and most reliable. I've had some episodes lost using some of the other platforms. But then once it's there, because one of the options is each person gets their own channel or their own track essentially.
Yeah,
And so then I just import them into Audacity and I use Audacity to edit. And one thing I always wanted to do from the start was add clips into the shows. And just due to time constraints, I gave myself like a firm date, like I have to release it this day, otherwise it's never getting done. And so in my first initial editing, even though I had prior experience, I wasn't great at it. And so I kind of just put something out there. And for the first 2 years of the show, I really didn't add in any clips or anything. And it's only it was starting season 3, so the last 3 years, that I've added clips and just little gags and jokes, things, sound clips like that, and it makes editing really long. It's about 2 to 2.5 hours of editing per 1 hour of actual content. So it just kind of depends on what I'm looking for and how well I've marked it down. I could, if I wanted to, kind of direct the way I add clips in and kind of pre-plan for things, but I like to just to talk and let the flow of the conversation kind of guide where I'm
yeah,
going to insert a clip. And so I've been going back to the prior seasons and re-editing and redoing some of those. And I've got around to a few. I haven't done a ton yet, but slowly and surely there I'm updating the older episodes as well.
yeah.
But yeah, just Audacity is kind of what I use. Mhm.
That reminds me, this morning I was on my way back home on the train from work this morning, and Sean from Review It Yourself from that podcast, he sent me a message, and he said to me, he's having a first where he's interviewing a filmmaker for his show
Hmm.
about a film that they're coming out with. And he said, "Have I got any pointers for him?" Because it's completely new to him. Because what he's used to doing is he will have people with him and they'll talk about films in general. It's just one of those sort of shows where they just talk
Hmm.
about a specific film. And I said to him about that, I said, as much as some podcasters get irritated by me doing it the way that I do with the bullet points, I said, the way that I do it is I have the bullet points so I know the points that need hitting. But I said, don't be afraid that while you're talking, I said, you've got to listen at the same time as you're going through these, because if you find something that's interesting to you, pull on that to see where
Yep.
it takes you
Yep.
and those
Emphasize that point.
tangents. But I said,
Hmm.
always make sure that the points that are necessary in the discussion with whoever you're talking with and whatever the subject's about, make sure that those necessary points are hit, but don't be afraid to veer off into other channels if you can.
Yep. I agree. I definitely agree. That's kind of the way to do it. Mhm. And like I always say, it's not a podcast if you don't go off topic, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So here we go then. I like this bit. So, what's your favorite bit of Christmas?
Ooh, that's tough. Nowadays, and this is going to sound cheesy, nowadays it's watching my kids open presents
Yeah,
and seeing the looks on their faces and how excited they are. But if it's something personal for me, it's probably Christmas music. Because as I mentioned earlier, there's something about Christmas music that even if it's done in like modern styles, modern arrangements, it's still different. It hits you
yeah,
different than a regular song does. So like Taylor Swift, her little Christmas EP that she released a few years ago, something about those songs, even though I like Taylor Swift, it's just I like those more. And some of it is because I know those songs already, and some of it is just because they're capturing a feel that you don't usually get throughout the rest of
yeah,
the year. And so it's got to be the music to me. Now, of course, I sell Christmas lights for a living, so I do love Christmas lights as well. I love hot chocolate, especially my mom's hot chocolate. It's Mexican hot chocolate with a little bit of cinnamon, and sometimes she puts cayenne in there as well. But
nice.
as much as I love that, and as much as I love her M&M cookies and the tree and all that, I think it's got to be Christmas music because it can automatically take you anywhere. You just as soon as you hear the first few notes, you're just like, ah, that's amazing. And you're back as a kid, or you're back at that time you went Christmas caroling at the hospital or whatever it may be. So it's got to be Christmas music, honestly. And I think there's nothing quite like it.
There's something interesting about Christmas music, if you think about it, or Christmas music that works. I'd say there's two different things. So there's Christmas songs that work and ones that don't. And
Yeah.
it's about the sound in a way,
Hmm.
because the weird thing is that when you listen to a Christmas song, no matter who's made it, if it's one that works, it's almost got a timeless quality to the sound of it
Hmm.
that is specifically Christmas based, almost like it's an oral glitter in a sense
Yeah.
that's in the production style that you only find in those songs that work. Whereas if people do a Christmas song and they use normal sound and it sounds like any other song that's on the charts, it doesn't quite hit the same way.
I agree. I totally agree. And then there's also the distinction between Christmas carols and Christmas songs,
Yeah,
right? So Christmas carols are like the ones that are very traditional that you'd hear maybe at church or from carol singers going around caroling, which unfortunately is becoming a lot more rare nowadays, at
yeah,
least here in the States. I don't know about over there, but there's like those, and a lot of those a lot of times are in 3/4 time, or they're in like a
yeah,
6/8, just some sort of like triple meter where
yeah,
it's very sing-songy and bouncy, but the the melody, it's there's lots of just 1 and 5 chords, and it
yeah,
kind of sometimes alternates between the two, and just really simple singable songs.
yeah.
And
And a
then you have
lot of
Christmas
vocal
songs.
rounds as well.
Exactly, exactly. And then you have Christmas songs, which I consider things like some of the Bing Crosby stuff, like
Yeah,
I'll Be Home for Christmas or White Christmas, songs that were written specifically for Christmas, but especially songs that I noticed like from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, kind of arranged using a little bit of that Tin Pan Alley style, but
yeah,
then redirected into more orchestral and more poppy bits of that era. They incorporated some more jazz in there. And so there's a lot more color chords. You think about like the Christmas song, Chestnuts Roasted on an
yeah,
Open Fire. There's a lot of 2-5-1s, but in different keys. There's a lot of just color chords. If you think about Christmas Time Is Here from the Charlie Brown, which I know is
yeah,
again is really huge over there, not quite as huge over where you guys are. But so like that one, there's literally just a minor seventh chord that they just descend chromatically,
yeah,
ba 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 ba, and it's just something about these extra color chords. All of a sudden, you're noticing like, oh, there's that. What is that? I like the way that sounds, and you don't hear that in regular pop music. And so because of that, I think it makes it stand out more. And so maybe back you listen to some of the Irving Berlin music,
yeah,
and that did kind of sound like some of his other songs because that was the style at the time. But nowadays, especially like you listen to, as I mentioned, Taylor Swift or Metallica or James Brown, even just any of the like popular artists from the last 30, 40 years, and their sound is completely different from Christmas songs.
yeah,
Of course, as we talked about in the last, I'd say maybe 15, 20 years, they have a standard formula of what works for a Christmas song. Most of the time it's in the key of C, it's in 4/4 now. You have to use some sort of either tubular bell or like glockenspiel or celeste, things like that that kind of really make it Christmassy. But I think for me, it's more of a harmonic sound. It's more of like the harmonic progressions and less of the actual like instrumentation, although instrumentation does help a lot.
yeah. I know when I've written tunes that are Christmas related myself, because I write music as
Mhm.
well. But when I've done that, it's what you said there about the progression or the backwards progression in a way, if you think about it that way. What you were saying there with that, I love, for instance, the change from the going from like the seventh to the sixth. So you get that drop there, and it's the
Mhm.
way that you think of that. In a sense, when you think of that with Christmas tunes, it's almost like I'm thinking. Now I know that when I go to play the glockenspiel part, I'm going to emphasize the seventh to the
Right.
sixth, then get the fifth, and then I'll do it. Sometimes I've done it where then I'll pick a chord that picks the fourth out
Right.
of the key, and it is a drop. It's just like ding 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 ding, and like that, and that's the magic. I think that sort of thing, and adding in those chords like the sixths,
Hmm.
and the seventh chords and the minor sevenths and things, and then throwing in the those sort of, this is getting really boring for people who don't know anything about music.
Sorry,
It's really tedious.
I
I'm
could
really
talk
sorry,
technical
but
music things all day long. I'm sorry.
that I just love that, the technical of that, and the way
Hmm.
that that drop works, or the rise, if you have a rise in a section that you might use as a transition from like a verse to a chorus, you'll do the rise by doing a chromatic, or you'll do it going up from the
Right.
sixth to the seventh to the eighth to the ninth, and then eventually to the octave to get that like big note at the
Well,
end.
like in so the Three Wise Men or XTC, it was really XTC, but they under the pseudonym that they released a song "Thanks for Christmas,"
Yep.
and there's a same thing. They kind of modulate. They go to a different key for a bit, and in order to get back to their original key, they do go have a little chromatic run, a bum 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 bum, and then they're back in C. Thanks for Christmas. So it's like little things like that. You're just like, huh, that's interesting and different, and it makes me feel a certain way, and it's just I love stuff like that, and I think that's what makes Christmas music special, especially Christmas songs from a particular era, is that they're not afraid to really emphasize those bits, where nowadays they kind of really don't. They kind of just stick with what I mentioned earlier.
Well, and Andy and Dave from XTC are two of the most overlooked and underrated songwriters, I think,
Agreed.
in the last 40, 50 years, personally.
Agreed. They have some fantastic tunes, and you mentioned XTC, and nobody knows what you're talking about.
No.
Maybe they remember King for a Day, but like Mayor of Simpleton is fantastic, and they have a lot of great tunes. So,
Yep. In the UK, people will only think of making plans for Nigel and not think of anything else, which is
mm,
criminal in a
yeah.
way. But, so, what is one of your favorite Christmas memories?
Ooh, there's so many. The one my my favorite Christmas gift, which is one of my favorite memories, is I remember running to the living room Christmas morning and seeing Castle Grayskull under the tree. So I always
Yeah,
remember that. But if I want to go with something more original, one that I never really share very much, it would probably be I was in college and I had gotten a bunch of friends to go Christmas caroling at a hospital.
yeah.
And while previously I'd done it before, it was under the auspices of a different group, and so I wasn't in control. I just showed up and sang, and they had worked it out where we could actually go down the halls and sing Christmas carols and stop at the different rooms and maybe bring people a little bit of joy. In this case, I was trying it all on my own. I didn't know anything about logistics or anything. I was just kind of trying to come up with something. But I had 5 friends show up, and we learned, like, 4-part harmony. We had one the melody just doubled and the bass doubled, and so it was just 6 of us, and we couldn't quite go room to room, but we sang there in the lobby, and they let us go up on the different floor and sing in the lobby as well, and so we were just Christmas caroling, and just the smiles that you could see, people's relatives or even some of the sick people would stick their head out and just feel better. They were smiling at us, and that is probably one of my all-time favorite Christmas memories, just knowing that this our stupid little singing thing brought joy and maybe eased someone's pain for a couple of minutes. So, it's gotta be one of those, and that was, I think, in 2001 or 2002. Yeah.
I'm going to have to come out with one of mine now, until one or two of them. I could mention the one where my stepdad was working in Holland for Christmas, and I went there to stay over Christmas with my stepdad and my mum,
Mhm.
and that was nice because they had the lake was frozen in front of the house that we lived in, and there were people skating on the ice, which was fantastic to see.
That's cool. Yeah,
That is
that's super
cool,
cool. You don't
and
get
that
like that stuff like that in South Texas, that's for sure.
we don't get that in the UK anymore very often. But yeah, yeah, more recently, one of my favorite memories more recently that I've never really said to anybody was, so I work a lot at Christmas because of my job. I work
Mhm.
Christmas Day, Christmas night usually. Um, and my brother surprised me because I was on a site with 3 other guys. There were 4 of us on there on Christmas night, and this was at Chesterfield. And my brother surprised me because he turned up and his wife had actually put together, so they'd had their Christmas dinner, and he had just arrived. So he drove miles to where I was working and brought a full Christmas dinner for me to have on Christmas night.
That's
And that's
amazing.
just amazing. And it shows
That's
that it shows this sort of this bond that you have between brothers as well.
It's very Dickensian, right? One of the things that A Christmas Carol did was it brought back and this where we want to do better for our fellow man and we want to reach out and help them. And so yeah, you have to work and that stinks. And so you can't be with us on Christmas, but maybe you can kind of in a way. Here's some of the Christmas dinner that we're having. It's just it's very nice and I love stuff like that. One of the other ones that really stands out to me was we used to have our cousins come over every Christmas Eve
Yeah.
and the parents would play Trivial Pursuit, and usually the kids would just kind of run around talking about what we hoped we were getting for Christmas and stuff from Santa. And I just remember this one, and I don't know why I remember this, but we were playing and I hit my heel of like my right foot on the bed frame and it hurt because it was like a metal back in the day, one of the simple just metal bed frames, and it hurt a lot. And my cousin decided to tease me. And now that I think about it, it was a very good thing to do on Christmas Eve, but he would tease me that if I had to rub it to make it stop hurting, and if I didn't stop rubbing it, my foot was gonna fall off. And so, so now that I think about it, it's like why did Santa bring you anything that year, man? You're picking on me now, but yeah. So it's like little things like that. But we would just run around crazy kids and have fun and play GI Joe and Transformers and all the fun stuff. And those were some of my most favorite memories for sure.
So going back to the show itself, then, how did the show art come about?
Ah, so there's actually a few. The one I'm using right now is my current one.
Yep.
My very first one was one that I made out of 8 bits. So I love the Nintendo game Mega Man, and I
Yeah.
used to just create little Mega Man characters out of just on Paint, Microsoft Paint. I would just kind of
Yeah.
edit them a little bit. So I kind of created a little Christmas scene with those, and I used that for a while. But I wanted something new and fresh, and I kind of just wanted a Christmas scene that I could put on a shirt. So I actually called Charlie Ague from Closer to Christmas and Ague Designs. And I said, "Hey, could you draw like a picture of some of my favorite characters?" And so he drew a few. And then I feel really bad because I kept adding to it. Oh, what about this guy? What about this guy? And so he was gracious enough to just add some of these other characters for me. So there was a really, really short-lived toy line and cartoon series called the Sectars. And so like on the wrapping paper, there's the face of Prince Dargon from the
Okay.
Sectars
Yeah.
right there. Little tidbits like that. There's a GI Joe train that you can see right here that is
Yep.
next to Lion-O. But really, I just wanted all of my favorite cartoon characters from like my favorite shows and my favorite toys just celebrating Christmas. And I messaged him the other day and I was looking at it and I thought, you know what? I love this so much. And I bought a shirt with it, but I'm thinking it might be a little too guy heavy. Let's get some girls in there. So I'm gonna have another updated version with Shira and Scarlet and Rainbow Bright and some of the other 80s Gem, probably some other 80s girls in there just to kind of fill out the party. So it's not that's right, just like a dude fest up in here. But yeah, it was really just I called him up and I said, I need something cool that's different that someone will see it and say, I know what that's about. And I think you can see this and it's about 80s toys or 80s cartoons and
Yeah.
Christmas because there's a big old Christmas tree with decorations. There's garland on the fireplace up here, and
I'm trying to think
there's
what the star is on the top because it's not a star.
that is the Matrix of Leadership from Transformers.
Yes, that's
that
it. I've been looking all this time and I thought that looks so familiar.
That's when he surprised me with that one. Everybody on the tree is something that he kind of just added. So Mega Man, we get the guy from Pee-wee's Playhouse. There's
Yep.
Mario somewhere in there, a California Raisin, a Game Boy right there next to Lion-O.
Yep.
So yeah, he Garfield I think is right here. So he
Yes.
just added
Yep.
added a bunch of other little things here and there, but it's all just my favorite cartoons, and I owe him so much because it's cool. I love it. It's one of my favorite things I think I've ever seen for the show. But
When this episode comes out, ooh, towards the middle to end of November, I want people to contact Jerry on the details he's going to give you later and tell him how many of those you can actually recognize.
Oh, that'd be fun. Maybe the winner will get a gift certificate from our store or something. I don't know. I'll see if I can make that happen.
We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
So, what about the show music then? Because you've already mentioned actually about the show music that you came up with it, you know,
Yeah, I
very
knew I
quickly.
wanted to call it Totally Rad Christmas. I was driving home, the song just kind of the melody just popped in my head. And so like I said, I recorded it really quickly. And then I kind of took a couple of days to just flesh it out. I picked up my guitar and started playing some chords. And um, now I will say that the drums are definitely the garage band drums, but
Okay,
like everything else was I just played my guitar and added some things, and I played the little keyboard on the garage band, which is really hard to do on a phone. It's so tiny.
really is.
But
Yeah,
but
it's
but I got that done. I did the harmonies, and it was so much fun. And then about 2 years ago, my daughter, she was just kind of singing along, and she was doing like almost stream of consciousness. She just started making up her own verses. And so I took most of what she did, tweaked it a little bit, added some chords underneath. But you can find a full version for my show. I released that as a little mini episode somewhere. It's on there. And it was just cool and catchy. And I wanted it to sound very 80s, but with a hint of modern, a hint of a modern touch, just because we are in the thousands. I don't want to be super stuck in there. But yeah, I tried to make it sound kind of a little new wavy. So I needed probably more reverb, but I did what I could.
if you'd add the reverb, it might give it that Phil Spector's Christmas album effect.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. And so I do want to record a full live version, but I just haven't gotten around to it yet. I'm actually working on some ideas for a Christmas album done in like 80s style, and I have specific artists that I'm going to be not like a style parody, almost like Weird Al, but it's more like style homage. I haven't quite gotten all the details worked out, and I'm hoping I can get that done in this April.
I'm picturing yourself and your two brothers now actually doing that music together.
They're way better singers than I am. Both of them were all-state tenors in choir. I wasn't in choir, I was in band, so I play all the brass instruments.
Okay.
But yeah, so I sing as best I can, and it's okay. I know I'm not great, but my brothers are really good. So every time I'm around them, I always get real shy. And then when I'm by myself, it's like fine. And if I'm on stage in front of people, it's fine. But for some reason, when I'm around my brothers, we sing and we harmonize and we go Christmas caroling, but I always feel really self-conscious around them. So but yeah, it would be fun. Yeah. In fact, we had done a demo for a silent night that I was recording to for my mom, and then it was all done, and I don't know what happened, but somehow I accidentally erased it. So now I have to do it all again, which is kind of a bummer, but it'll be all right. We'll make it work.
With your brass playing, that would work for Christmas music, especially if
Mhm,
you multi-tracked it and you played a variety of instruments, brass instruments. That's
mhm.
perfect for Christmas.
Oh, big time. Yeah, brass band is like right there. Yeah. So, yeah.
Salvation Army in the UK and well in America as well. I think Salvation Army over there as well. Big
Mhm.
thing.
Yeah, yeah. The brass bands themselves have actually kind of gone into decline, but I remember growing up, there was a lot of them still, and you could find them all over. But you know how it goes.
So, what advice would you give to people if they were starting their own podcast?
Oof, don't give up. First of all, I'd say get a good mic because my first 10 to 12 episodes, I did not have a decent mic. It was just a headset that I had, and the sound is terrible, and I have a hard time listening to it. But I'd say even if you just spend $30 on a mic, that mic will probably sound better than like your gaming headset that you're using. So I'd say get a decent mic. Don't be afraid to narrow your focus. Even if you're super niche, you are going to find an audience somewhere.
Yep.
And that's one thing I've learned because I know I painted myself into a corner with 80s and Christmas, but you'd be surprised how many people reach out to me and say, I love this. This reminds me of when I grew up, and they'll tell me stories and things like that. And so I say, yeah, talk about what you want to talk about. Don't be afraid to talk to your friends or brothers or relatives or anybody that you know you're going to have a good time with, and get yourself a good mic. And if you could do that, then that's like half the battle already done. So yeah,
I
that's
love the
kind of what
fact
I'd
that
say.
yeah, I
Yeah.
love the fact that podcasting catches the niches. Personally,
Exactly, exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
I
I mean,
never if they had had an 80s podcast, I wouldn't have started one. I would have just listened to it. And but they didn't. So I kind of created my own. And now there's podcasts for Christmas horror and there's podcasts for just what is it? Japanese Christmas music. And there's,
yes, Holly
you
Jolly
know,
Chris, Holly Jolly Xmasu.
yep, yep, with Scott. And there's
Scott, yeah.
just all sorts of cool, fun things that you're like, I don't know what this is, but I love it and it's great. And you're gonna really hit on something. And it could be something as simple as just talking about your life, but just talk about something that you're passionate about and people will listen.
Scott pulled me in because I'm a fan of Yellow Magic Orchestra and Ryuku Sakamoto as well. So that got me interested
Oh,
with
nice.
that. So, what sort of podcast do you listen to? Are they mostly Christmas related, or do you have a lot of other shows that you listen to as well?
So the one I listen to most is it's still How Did This Get Made? That was like
Yeah.
my entrance, and that's the one I still have to listen to. I like Crime Junkie, and I know they kind of
Yep.
got a lot of flack because they didn't cite their
Yes.
sources early on, but they their storytelling I like. I
Yep.
like it better than a lot of the other storytelling out there. But the ones that I have to listen to is Tis the Podcast,
Yep.
not only because they're my friends, but because that's like the first Christmas podcast that really got me hooked. I do listen to a lot of Christmas podcasts, but then I also listen to a lot of just 80s podcasts and just comic book related. So, what's that? The Batman one I listen to. I cannot think of its name right now. Holy Batcast. There's a lot of things like that, but it is the majority of it is Christmas related. And during the season, I kind of slimmed down to where I don't get to listen at work like I usually can because this is where people are coming in to buy, really. So I just listen as I drive, and in that case, it's mostly just one of the first two that I mentioned, either How Did This Get Made or Crime Junkie. But I don't really listen to a lot of Christmas podcasts during the season. It's after the season's over when I've slowed down. I'm back on just 5 days a week. I'm not working 12-hour days anymore, and that's when I can catch up on all my favorites. Like Advent Calendar House is probably one of my all-time favorites, and things like that. But yes, it is mostly Christmas podcasts.
I'm just writing down now. Advent Calendar House.
Yes, with Mike Westfall.
So I'm writing his name down as well.
Yeah, you should. He's a great guy.
I can't
He
believe that one slipped through, and I've not seen that one.
Oh yeah, no, it's kind of like he and I are very similar as far as what we like and things like that. So his show is like just a little better produced version of my show, but I also talk about music and toys and things where he just kind of sticks with specials. But his guests are great. In fact, some of his guests have come over and done my show as well. And but they're old friends of his, so they kind of have that rapport that we talked about in the beginning, where they that relationship that really makes it special and makes you want to tune in. So yeah, I love Advent Calendar House. Christmas Clatter hasn't done a whole lot, but when he did,
Yeah.
it was amazing. He hasn't done a lot in recent years. He's getting ready to gear up again, Todd. And so there's a ton out there that I really, really enjoy. But something about the comedy of How Did This Get Made is just my favorite. With Paul Scheer and Jason Mantzoukas and June Diane Raphael, and I love everything about that show. It's ridiculous, and they talk about terrible movies, but it's so fun. So
Yep. But they're asking the same question that a lot of us ask. You watch these films and you think, how did this get made?
exactly, exactly.
How did this get through? We were talking about the difference with music and media earlier on, as was over the years, it's become more commercial. Actually, we are
Hmm.
talking about that before officially the show started, where we were saying that back in the 70s and 80s, people who were creatives were allowed a bit more freedom.
Hmm.
Whereas nowadays it's more commercial. And so nowadays you see these films that come out nowadays that are, for want of a better phrase, not good. And you
Right.
and you think, how did that get made now when it's a bit more tricky to get films made?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot more studio notes and things like that that they didn't get a whole lot of back then, and so you could be a little bit more experimental and stuff like that. And so I do rather enjoy that particular pod. But if I kind of listen to just about anything. There's another one, 80s flick flashback that I like. Moving Panels is about comic books and comic book movies. What's Just Another Friday Night? There's some guys out of San Antonio, so I I relate to a lot of what they talk about because they just love pop culture in general, and they typically like just about everything. They try not to be too negative, and I try not to be too negative on certain things either. And every once in a while, I do let my guest affect me, and we kind of dig on a certain topic. But most of the time, I try to be upbeat and positive about a certain, yeah, everything we cover. And but those guys are great, you know. So it's a lot of shows like that that I kind of listen to.
Okay, so where can people find you and get hold of you then, Jerry?
Okay, so the easiest way is totallyradchristmas.com. That'll take you, you can email me there, you can just request, make comments, things like that. Of course, I also have a link tree, so linktree.com/totallyradchristmas will give you all my socials. So I have a Facebook group as well called the Totally Rad Christmas Mall and Arcade, where anybody can post anything really, as long as it's Christmas or 80s related, either one. I kind of let it slide. And yeah, it's all fun and good. And we just talk about whatever. And but yeah, I have Instagram. I'm at Totally Rad Christmas, at Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. I'm at Rad Christmas, and I do have Threads and Blue Sky as well, but I'm not on as often as probably I should be. And then you can also email me at totallyradchristmas@gmail.com.
I know nothing about. I've heard about that. What's it called again?
Blue Sky, yeah.
Blue Sky. Not done that one. I do Threads. I'm doing myself now promoting. Do Threads. I've got Facebook,
Uh-huh.
Instagram, X, or Twitter. I still call it Twitter.
I do
Um,
too. I have to force myself to say X, yeah.
and through podslikeus at gmail.com. There's a Patreon that costs £1 a month as well if people want to pay that out for some extra bonus longer episodes and extra episodes and things as well. But anyway,
Yeah.
until next time, thanks for speaking with me today.
Thanks for having me on. This was a blast.
And thank you everyone for listening, and hope you're listening again to another episode of Pods Like Us.